The clinking of crystal glasses echoed loudly in the private dining room of the Buckhead Steakhouse. I sat at the head of the long oak table, looking at the two people I trusted most in the world. Tasha, my wife of 10 years, was laughing loudly. She held up her glass of imported champagne, making sure the restaurant lights caught the massive diamond ring on her finger. It was a ring I paid for with 40 years of sweat and grease from my auto shops. Next to her sat Darnell, the man married to my oldest daughter, Aaliyah. Darnell wore a tailored Italian suit, a suit that cost more than his failing logistics business made in an entire month. Tasha tapped her glass with a silver spoon, demanding attention. "Happy 70th birthday to the old man," she announced. Her voice was too loud, dripping with a condescending sweetness that made my stomach turn. "We all know Reginald is slowing down," she said, smiling at the other wealthy guests. "He can barely keep up with me anymore, so we have to celebrate these milestones while we still can." Darnell chuckled, taking a long sip of his expensive scotch. He leaned back in his chair, acting like he owned the entire building. "It is time to pass the torch," Pops Darnell said. "You have had your run, but the new generation is ready to take the wheel." I looked at the gold watch on his wrist. It was my watch, the vintage Rolex I left on my dresser that very morning. He had simply taken it, wearing it right to my face, showing me exactly what he thought of me. I did not yell. I did not make a scene. I just watched them. The waiter brought out the birthday cake. It was small, a cheap afterthought, bought at a grocery store. Tasha handed me a thin, generic card. "I did not have time to get you a real gift, baby," she said, not even looking me in the eye. "I was too busy helping Darnell with his new investors today." Darnell smiled proudly, adjusting the cuffs of his silk shirt. "Yeah, Pops," he said. "Business is booming for me. We are closing a massive $50,000 deal tomorrow. I knew the truth. I knew his business was drowning in mob debt. I knew he was a complete fraud. But I kept my mouth shut." Suddenly, I felt a sharp pain in my chest. My vision blurred for a second, a dark wave washing over my eyes. The doctors told me it was just old age. Tasha slid a glass of warm milk toward me, her manicured fingers tapping the glass. "Drink up, baby," she said. "You know it helps your bones and your tired heart." I reached for the glass, but a small hand grabbed my suit sleeve. It was Trey, my 8-year-old boy. He had been sitting quietly at the end of the table all night watching the adults. His eyes were wide, filled with a raw, pure terror. He pulled me down, forcing me to lean close to him. "Dad," he whispered. His voice was shaking so hard I could barely hear him. "Do not drink that. Do not drink the milk." I frowned, looking at my young son. "What is wrong, Trey?" I asked. "Are you feeling sick tonight?" Trey shook his head violently. He glanced terrified at his mother, then looked back to me. "Mom is lying," he whispered, tears welling up in his eyes. I heard her on the phone in the bathroom today. She had the shower running loud, but I heard her. She was talking to Darnell. She said the poison is ready. She said tonight is the last night for the old man. The world stopped spinning. The chatter and laughter in the restaurant faded into a dull, ringing hum. I looked at the glass of milk. It looked perfectly normal. I looked at Tasha. She was smiling, watching me with cold, calculating eyes. "Drink it, baby," she urged. "It is good for your heart." I looked at Darnell. He was watching me too, a smug grin on his face, waiting for me to swallow my own death. The nausea hit me in heavy waves. For weeks I had been feeling weak. For weeks Tasha had been giving me this special milk every single night right before bed. I looked down at Trey. My brave little boy was trembling like a leaf in a storm. He had heard them. He had heard his own mother plotting to murder his father, working with his son-in-law. I pushed the glass away. It slid across the white tablecloth, spilling a few drops of the white liquid. "I am not thirsty," I said. My voice sounded hollow, like it belonged to a ghost. Tasha frowned, her perfect mask slipping for a fraction of a second. But Reginald, she insisted, you need your nutrients to stay strong. I stood up slowly. The chair scraped loudly against the hardwood floor. I need some air, I said. I grabbed Trey by the hand. Come on, son, I said. We are going for a walk. Tasha stood up quickly, her face flashing with genuine anger. Where are you going, Reginald? She demanded. We have not even cut the cake. Darnell rolled his eyes, sighing loudly for the whole room to hear. Let the old man go, Tasha, he muttered. He is probably just tired and confused. You know his mind is going. I did not look back. I squeezed Trey hand tight, leading him out of the private dining room, away from the monsters I called my family. The cool Atlanta night air hit my face as I pushed open the heavy glass doors of the restaurant. I held Trey tight by his small hand, guiding him toward my battered old pickup truck parked at the edge of the valet lot. The young valet attendant looked at my grease-stained boots and sneered, expecting a small tip. He did not know that I could buy the entire block with a single phone call. I tipped him a crisp $20 bill and strapped my son into the passenger seat. My hands were shaking, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. We drove away from the bright lights of Buckhead, merging onto the dark highway. The silence inside the cab of the truck was heavy, thicker than the summer humidity. Usually Trey would be talking about his video games or asking for a late-night ice cream cone, but tonight he was silent as a tomb. He sat curled up in the corner of the leather seat, his knees pulled up tight to his chest. He was shaking, vibrating with a pure, raw terror that no 8-year-old child should ever have to feel. Dad Trey finally whispered, his voice trembling over the hum of the engine. Are they going to hurt us? I pulled the truck over to the shoulder of the road, the hazard lights clicking in a steady rhythm. I turned to look at my boy. His eyes were wide and wet with tears. I placed a heavy, calloused hand on his shoulder. No, son, I said, my voice dropping to a low, steady rumble. They are not going to hurt us. They made a terrible mistake today. They thought Reginald was just a tired old mechanic waiting to die. They forgot who built this empire. I put the truck back in drive, but I did not head toward the main entrance of our neighborhood. I needed to see it for myself. I needed absolute proof before I burned their world to the ground. I drove past our gated subdivision and pulled into an abandoned lot across the street from my house. It was overgrown with tall weeds and deep shadows, the perfect place for a ghost to watch the living. I killed the engine and I turned off the headlights. Stay down, Trey, I whispered, reaching over to push his head below the window line. Cover yourself with this blanket and do not make a single sound. We sat in the darkness waiting. The minutes ticked by like agonizing hours. My chest ached with every breath, the arsenic working its slow, invisible magic in my bloodstream. Then I saw it. A sleek, black luxury SUV. The one Darnell could not actually afford cut through the darkness. It did not pull into the driveway. It stopped right at the curb directly in front of my massive brick home. The home I bought with blood, sweat, and smart investments over 40 long years. The passenger door opened first. Tasha stepped out onto the sidewalk. She looked around this quiet street, but she was not checking for safety. She was checking for witnesses. She moved with a confident, arrogant stride that made my stomach churn. She was wearing the red dress I bought her for our anniversary, the one she swore she was saving for a special occasion. Apparently plotting my murder and stealing my fortune was special enough for her. Then the driver door swung open. Darnell emerged, tall and arrogant. He walked around the hood of the car, adjusting the collar of his expensive jacket. He did not look like a man dropping off his mother-in-law. He looked like a man claiming his grand prize. He walked right up to my wife. He grabbed her by the waist with a sickening familiarity and pulled her close. They kissed. It was not a quick peck on the cheek. It was deep, hungry, and possessive. Right there on my front lawn, under the bright street lamp I paid the taxes for, they kissed. It felt like they were spitting directly in my face. It felt like they were pouring gasoline over my life and striking a match. My blood boiled hot, a red haze clouding my vision. I wanted to turn the key, slam my foot on the gas pedal, and drive my heavy steel truck right over them. My foot hovered over the accelerator. The rage was a living, breathing beast in my chest. But then I heard a soft whimper from the floorboard. Trey was peeking over the edge of the window. His wide eyes reflected the orange glow of the streetlights. He saw his mother kissing his older sister husband. He saw the ultimate betrayal. I froze, taking a deep, ragged breath. I could not act on impulse tonight. I had to protect my son. I watched them break apart, laughing in the dark. They walked up the paved driveway to the front door. Tasha used her key, the lock clicking loudly in the quiet night. They walked inside my house like they already owned the place. They thought I was a dead man walking. They thought I was weak, foolish, and easily erased. They were about to learn that the old lion still had his teeth. I started the engine of the heavy truck, keeping the headlights completely off. I let the vehicle roll slowly down the dark street, slipping away like a shadow in the Atlanta night. I did not turn the lights on until we were 3 blocks away from my house. I looked in the rearview mirror one last time. My massive brick home was glowing with warm light, looking like a welcoming sanctuary. But it was a trap, a coffin they were building for me. I turned the steering wheel, merging onto the main road leading downtown. Trey sniffled in the dark cab. Daddy asked, "Where are we going tonight?" His small voice broke my heart, sounding so fragile and confused. I gripped the wheel tight. "We are going to a safe place, son," I said. "We are going to get help, and then we are going to make them pay for what they did." I reached into the inner pocket of my worn jacket and pulled out a heavy satellite phone. It was an old model, but the line was perfectly secure, completely untraceable by any cell tower. I drove with one hand, navigating the empty highway, and dialed a number I had not called in 10 years. The phone rang exactly twice. A deep, rough voice answered on the other end. "Status," the voice demanded. I did not waste any time with pleasantries. "Calvin," I said, "it is Reginald. I need you to wake up because we have a major problem." There was a brief pause. "Reginald," Calvin said, losing his robotic tone. "It has been a long time, boss. What do you need?" Calvin was the best private investigator in the state of Georgia. He was the man I called when the unions tried to strike at my shipping ports. He was the man I paid to make my corporate enemies disappear from the playing field. I took a deep breath, fighting the burning sensation in my chest. "I need you to initiate a total asset freeze," I said. "I want you to execute the Phoenix Protocol immediately." Calvin whistled low into the receiver. "The Phoenix Protocol," he asked. "Boss, that cuts off everything. Are you absolutely sure?" "I am dead certain," I replied, my voice hard as steel. "Tasha and Darnell are plotting to kill me. They are poisoning me slowly, trying to take the empire. I want you to lock down every single corporate account, every trust fund, and every black credit card under my name. If their names are attached as secondary users, flag them as stolen. I want the well to go completely dry by sunrise." "Consider it done," Calvin said. "The banking directors will process the freeze in 1 hour. What else do you need?" I looked at my son, sleeping exhausted against the passenger window. "I need a secure medical team," I said. "Send Dr. Carter to the penthouse suite at the Obsidian Hotel downtown. Bring a full toxicology kit and the heavy chelation meds. I'm sick, Calvin, and I need to get the poison out of my blood tonight." "I will have the doctor waiting for you in the lobby," Calvin promised. "And Calvin," I added, my anger rising up again, "I want eyes on my house. I want you to tap the phones, hack the security cameras, and put microphones in the air vents. I want to hear them breathing. I want to know exactly what they do when they realize the money is gone." "I am on it," Calvin said. "Welcome back to the war, Reginald." I hung up the heavy phone, tossing it onto the dashboard. The Atlanta skyline loomed ahead of us, a towering fortress of glass and steel. For 40 years, I had played the part of the humble mechanic. I drove an old truck, I wore simple clothes, and I let people underestimate me. I wanted my family to love me for who I was, not for the billions of dollars sitting in my holding companies. But that humble mechanic died tonight, murdered by a glass of poisoned milk and a kiss on the front lawn. The man driving this truck now was the ruthless titan who built Jefferson Logistics from the ground up. I pulled up to the heavily guarded entrance of the Obsidian Hotel. The young valet took one look at my rusty truck and started to wave me away. He thought I was a lost delivery driver. I did not say a word. I simply reached into my wallet and pulled out a solid black titanium card. It had no numbers on the front, only a tiny gold chip and my signature. It was an invite-only membership reserved for the top 1% of the city. I held it out the window. The valet's eyes went wide with sheer terror. He recognized the card immediately. He bowed his head and quickly opened my door. "Welcome back, Mr. Jefferson," he stammered, his hands shaking. I scooped Trey into my arms, carrying his sleeping body through the grand marble lobby. The air smelled of expensive white tea and massive wealth. We stepped into the private elevator, riding up to the secure penthouse. Tasha and Darnell thought the game was over. They thought they had won the grand prize. They had no idea that the real game was just beginning, and I controlled every single piece on the board. The bright morning sun cut heavily through the thick silk curtains of my master bedroom. Tasha stretched her arms wide, waking up slowly in the massive custom bed that I had purchased for our 10th anniversary. She smiled deeply, rolling over to look at Darnell. He was sleeping soundly, tangled in the high thread count sheets, completely comfortable in another manhouse. They genuinely thought I was dead or wandering the dark streets, losing my mind from the poison. They believed the massive empire was finally theirs, ready to be carved up and spent like loose change. Tasha kicked off the heavy duvet and walked barefoot into my massive walk-in closet. She bypassed her own extensive section, moving straight to my side. She grabbed my finest imported cashmere sweater and tossed it right onto Darnell's chest. "Wake up, baby," she purred softly, tapping his broad shoulder. "We have a whole lot of celebrating to do today." Darnell sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes with a lazy grin. He looked around the luxurious room, breathing in the sweet scent of pure victory. "What is the big plan, beautiful?" he asked, sliding his arms smoothly into my expensive sweater. "We are going shopping," Tasha declared, her voice filled with pure greed. "I want a brand new diamond necklace, and you need some fresh designer shoes for your big CEO debut." They did not bother to call the police to report a missing husband. They did not call the local hospitals to see if a sick old man had collapsed in the cold street. They simply took long hot showers, drank my imported coffee, and drove Darnell's leased sports car straight to the most expensive boutique in the heart of Buckhead. The boutique was a shining fortress of glass and white marble, designed specifically to separate the incredibly wealthy from their money. The cool air smelled of rare leather and highly exclusive perfumes. Tasha walked proudly through the heavy glass doors, striding like a confident queen entering her grand throne room. Darnell followed close behind her, wearing my vintage Rolex on his wrist and a deeply smug grin on his face. The store manager, a tall man with a sharp European accent, rushed over to greet them instantly. "Welcome back, Mrs. Jefferson," the manager said smoothly, bowing his head slightly. "How can we serve you today?" Tasha waved her manicured hand, completely dismissing his polite pleasantries. Bring me the platinum jewelry trays right now, she commanded, and fetch my man a pair of those crocodile loafers, the ones locked behind the secure glass. They spent 2 solid hours tearing through the store, acting like absolute royalty. Tasha tried on heavy diamond necklaces, holding them up to the bright vanity lights, admiring her own selfish reflection. Darnell strutted confidently in front of the tall, full-length mirrors, admiring the exotic leather shoes, acting exactly like a self-made billionaire. They piled up a massive mountain of luxury goods right on the sleek glass counter. "Ring it all up," Tasha said, tossing her hair over her shoulder. She did not even ask for the total price. That is exactly how arrogant she was. She just assumed my corporate bank accounts were endless, bottomless pits for her to drain entirely. The manager smiled warmly, typing the heavy items into the sleek digital register. "That will be $42,000, the manager said, his voice smooth and incredibly professional. Darnell reached deep into his pocket, eager to play the massive big shot. He pulled out the black titanium card, the exact same supplementary card I had given him 2 years ago for his fake business emergencies. "I got this one, babe," he said confidently, winking at Tasha. He tossed the heavy metal card onto the hard glass counter. It landed loudly with a highly satisfying clink. The manager picked up the card, handling it with extreme professional care. He inserted the gold chip directly into the card reader. Tasha leaned casually against the counter, already planning her next expensive shopping destination. Darnell checked his phone, completely ignoring the massive transaction. The machine beeped loudly. It was a harsh, dissonant sound, cutting right through the quiet luxury of the boutique. The manager frowned deeply, staring closely at the small digital screen. "I deeply apologize, Mr. Darnell," the manager said, his perfectly polite tone slipping just a fraction. "It seems there is a slight error here. Let me try it again." The manager pulled the card out carefully and wiped the gold chip on his sleeve. He pushed it back firmly into the electronic reader. The machine processed silently for 3 seconds and then beeped again. A loud, flat, embarrassing rejection. "Decline," the manager read aloud, his voice echoing slightly. Darnell snapped his head up quickly, his smug smile vanishing instantly. "What do you mean, declined?" he demanded angrily, stepping much closer to the counter. "Do you know exactly who I am? Run it again right now. There is millions of dollars backing that piece of plastic." The manager sighed softly, typing a manual override code into the register. He tried it one more time. The machine beeped a third time, flashing a bright red warning right on the screen. "I am so sorry, sir," the manager said, his voice turning entirely cold and highly dismissive. "The bank has officially flagged this card. It says the entire account is frozen by direct order of the primary holder. I have been strictly instructed to confiscate this card immediately." The manager pulled a pair of sharp silver scissors from beneath the counter. Before Darnell could even react, the manager snipped the heavy black titanium card directly in half. The 2 ruined pieces clattered onto the glass, totally and completely useless. "What are you doing?" Darnell yelled, slamming his hand down hard on the counter. "That is my personal property. You cannot do that." Tasha pushed Darnell aside quickly, her face flushing bright red with sudden intense embarrassment. "Calm down, Darnell," she hissed sharply. "It is probably just a stupid security hold. Reginald probably forgot to pay a simple bill, or the bank thinks there is fraud because of the very large amount." She reached frantically into her designer purse and pulled out her own heavy platinum card. "Use mine instead," she told the manager, her voice trembling slightly with fresh panic. "Just put it through quickly." The manager did not even bother to insert her card into the machine. He simply typed her specific name into his secure computer terminal. He looked up at Tasha, his eyes completely devoid of any respect. "Mrs. Jefferson," the manager said loudly, ensuring the other wealthy customers in the store could hear him clearly. "Your entire financial portfolio is securely locked. Every single card under the Jefferson name has been permanently frozen due to a Phoenix protocol. I must ask you both to leave the premises immediately, or I will call mall security." Tasha gasped loudly, clutching her expensive purse tight to her chest. She looked around the quiet boutique. Two wealthy women she knew from the country club were standing near the handbag display, whispering and pointing directly at her. The sharp humiliation hit her exactly like a physical blow. She was no longer the untouchable queen of Buckhead. She was a broke, declined imposter getting publicly kicked out of a store. Darnell grabbed Tasha by the arm, aggressively dragging her quickly away from the counter. "Let us go right now," he muttered angrily. "We will call the bank and get this sorted out fast." The stupid old man probably messed something up. They walked out of the store fast. Their heads hung low in deep shame. They left the heavy diamonds and the exotic crocodile shoes sitting uselessly on the counter. They walked out into the bright morning sun, feeling the very first cold chill of their impending doom. The massive well was completely dry, and the brutal desert of their own making was just beginning. Tasha marched out of the boutique, her face burning with pure humiliation. Darnell followed closely behind her, cursing under his breath. The bright Atlanta sun felt oppressive beating down on their heavy designer clothes. They needed to get into his imported sports car and speed away from the wealthy shopping district. Tasha adjusted her expensive sunglasses, trying to hide her face from the other shoppers. They turned the corner, walking briskly toward the VIP parking zone. Darnell reached into his pocket, pulling out his sleek key fob. He pressed the unlock button, but the familiar chirp of the engine did not happen. Instead, he heard the loud grinding noise of heavy hydraulic gears. Right there on the pristine Buckhead street, a massive rusty tow truck was backing up to his beautiful silver sports car. A burly man in a dirty yellow vest was hooking thick steel chains directly to the front axle of the vehicle. "Hey," Darnell shouted, dropping his keys on the concrete sidewalk. "What do you think you are doing? Get your filthy hands off my car right now." Darnell ran forward, his chest puffed out, ready to intimidate the working man. The tow truck driver did not even flinch. He secured the heavy metal hook and pulled a crumpled clipboard from his greasy belt. "Are you?" Darnell, the driver asked, chewing loudly on a piece of gum. "Yes, I am Darnell," he barked, his face twisting with arrogant rage. "And you are making a massive mistake, buddy. That car is worth more than your entire life. Unhook it right now before I call the police and have you arrested for grand theft." Tasha caught up to him, breathing heavily, looking around in sheer panic. "Darnell, stop yelling," she whispered frantically, grabbing his arm. "People are staring at us again." She was right. The loud commotion had drawn a significant crowd. Two wealthy women from the country club, the exact same women from the jewelry store, had stepped out of a nearby wave. They held their expensive iced coffees, watching the drama unfold with obvious delight. Tasha felt her stomach drop, realizing her pristine reputation was crumbling into dust. The tow truck driver chuckled a rough sound that grated against the sophisticated atmosphere of the street. "Call the cops, buddy," the driver said calmly, tapping his clipboard with a dirty pen. "They will just tell you to read the paperwork. This is a lawful repossession order issued directly by the primary lien holder." Darnell snatched the paper from the clipboard, his eyes darting frantically across the legal text. "What are you talking about?" he stammered, his confident voice cracking slightly. "I pay the lease on this car every single month. It belongs to my logistics company." The driver flipped a heavy lever on the side of his truck. The hydraulic winch whined loudly, lifting the front tires of the silver sports car completely off the ground. "Read the fine print, genius," the driver said, stepping up into the cab of his truck. "The vehicle is registered to a subsidiary of Jefferson Logistics. The corporate office canceled the lease agreement at exactly 8 o'clock this morning. The asset has been officially recalled by Mr. Reginald Jefferson himself. Tasha gasped, snatching the paper out of Darnell's shaking hands. She read the bold print at the very top of the page. It was true. The order was signed digitally by Reginald utilizing his supreme executive authority. He is doing this on purpose, Tasha hissed, her eyes wide with a sudden, terrifying realization. Reginald is not wandering the streets confused. He is sitting behind a desk somewhere, cutting us off piece by piece. Darnell's face drained of all color. The smug arrogance was completely gone, replaced by a cold, sickening dread. "Wait!" Darnell yelled, running up to the window of the tow truck. "Just wait a minute. I can pay you cash right now to drop the car. Let us work out a deal, man." He reached frantically into his designer wallet, pulling out a small stack of $100 bills. He tried to shove the money through the open window, acting like a desperate criminal on a street corner. The driver pushed Darnell, hand away, looking at him with pure disgust. "Keep your chump change," the driver said. "I do not take bribes, and I definitely do not mess with the Jefferson Empire. You can collect your personal belongings at the downtown impound lot, assuming you can afford the taxi ride over there." The driver rolled up his window, put the heavy truck into gear, and drove away. The beautiful silver sports car trailed behind it, bouncing sadly over the speed bumps, disappearing into the heavy Atlanta traffic. Darnell stood frozen on the sidewalk, holding his useless stack of cash. He looked completely pathetic standing in front of the high-end boutiques without a ride, without a working credit card, and without a shred of dignity. Tasha spun around, glaring at him with pure venom. "How could you be so stupid, Darnell?" she screamed, completely abandoning her polite society voice. "You told me your business was securing the lease. You told me you were completely independent." "I am independent," Darnell fired back, stepping defensively toward her. "The old man just co-signed the original paperwork years ago to help me out. I did not know he could legally pull the plug like this. He must have found out about the money." Darnell pulled out his phone, his hands shaking violently as he opened a rideshare app. "I will just call a private car," he muttered, trying to salvage some small piece of his shattered pride. "We will go back to the estate and figure this out." He tapped the screen to request a luxury ride. A red error message flashed instantly across his phone. "Payment method declined," the screen read. "Please update your billing information." Darnell stared at the glowing rectangle, breathing heavily. Every single card linked to his digital wallet was a Jefferson corporate card. He was completely locked out of the modern world. They stood stranded on the hot pavement, completely stripped of their false armor. The luxury car was gone, the credit cards were plastic garbage, and their wealthy friends were laughing at them. The dominoes were falling fast, and the heavy weight of my wrath was finally crashing down upon their heads. The hot pavement of Buckhead felt like an oven, baking the absolute shame directly into Darnell. He stood on the sidewalk holding his useless phone. Tasha paced back and forth, fanning her face with her expensive designer purse. They had no car, no credit, and no dignity left. "Call Aaliyah right now," Tasha hissed, her voice dripping with pure venom. "Tell your stupid wife to transfer the funds from her personal trust. We need cash today, Darnell, or we are completely ruined." Darnell nodded, swiping the cracked screen of his phone. He walked a few steps away from the staring crowds, finding a small patch of shade near a brick alleyway. He dialed his wife, the woman he had been actively betraying for months. The phone rang 3 times before Aaliyah finally answered. Darnell, Aaliyah said, her voice sounding incredibly tired and deeply stressed. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I thought you were in Dallas today finalizing the new shipping contracts for the corporate fleet." Darnell closed his eyes, slipping instantly into his practiced role. He pinched the bridge of his nose, acting like a brilliant CEO, carrying the weight of the entire world. "I am in Dallas, baby." Darnell lied smoothly, not even blinking at the blazing Atlanta sun. But everything is falling apart right now. The main investors just pulled out at the absolute last second. They are threatening to sue the company, Aaliyah, and they are demanding a massive penalty fee by noon. Aaliyah gasped loudly through the speaker. "Oh my God, Darnell," she cried out, her anxiety spiking instantly. "What does that mean for us?" she asked. "What are we going to do?" Darnell let out a heavy, dramatic sigh. "It means I'm going to lose the business, baby," he said, making his voice sound remarkably desperate and broken. "It means they're going to seize our house and take everything we have built, unless I can wire them $50,000 right now to stall the legal injunction." $50,000. Aaliyah repeated, her voice shaking with pure fear. "Darnell, we do not have that kind of liquid cash sitting around. You promised me the business was finally stable. You told me my father was backing this specific deal. Do not bring your father into this right now." Darnell snapped sharply, letting a flash of real anger bleed into his fake panic. "Reginald is a dinosaur, Aaliyah, and his outdated corporate policies are exactly what caused this mess. I need you to be my partner today, not his little girl. I need you to go to the bank and pull the money from your emergency trust fund immediately." Aaliyah started to cry softly on the other end of the line. "Darnell," she sobbed gently, "I cannot just withdraw $50,000 without dual authorization. You know the strict trust rules. I have to ask my dad to co-sign the heavy release forms." Darnell gritted his teeth, looking over at Tasha. Tasha rolled her eyes, motioning for him to push harder to break his wife down completely. "Then you find him." Aaliyah Darnell demanded, his tone turning incredibly cruel and highly manipulative. "You find Reginald and you beg him for the money. Tell him it is a matter of life and death for our family. Because if I lose this company today, I am walking away from everything, Aaliyah. I cannot be married to a woman who will not even support my massive dreams. Please do not say that Darnell." Aaliyah pleaded, completely desperate to save her highly toxic marriage. "I will find the money for you. I will go see my dad right now. I will do whatever it takes to save us, I promise you." "Just get it done, Aaliyah," Darnell ordered coldly. "Wire it directly to my private offshore account, not the joint corporate ledger. Do it before noon or do not bother calling me back." He hung up the phone abruptly, not even saying goodbye to the woman who loved him. He slipped the phone back into his tailored pocket, feeling a massive surge of dark, twisted pride. He had hooked her completely. He knew Aaliyah would panic and she would run directly to the main estate, begging to open the heavy vaults. Tasha walked over to him, a wicked smile playing on her lips. "You are truly brilliant, baby," she purred softly, running her hand down his chest. She bought the Dallas lie completely. Once she wires that heavy cash, we can book a private jet to the islands and leave this massive mess behind us forever. Darnell laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Yeah," he agreed, looking at the spot where his luxury car used to be. "But first we need to get off this stupid sidewalk. I have $500 hidden in my shoe for emergencies. We are going to hail a dirty city cab and go back to the estate. We need to pack the luxury watches and clean out the hidden wall safe before the old man realizes we are fully awake." They turned away from the high-end boutiques, stepping out into the busy street to wave down a passing yellow taxi. They truly believed they had engineered the perfect escape plan. They thought they had manipulated my daughter perfectly, using her love as a weapon against her. But they did not know that I was listening to every single word of that miserable phone call. Calvin had mirrored Darnell's mobile device hours ago. Sitting in my secure hotel suite, I heard the brutal manipulation, and I felt my blood turn to absolute ice. They were not just stealing my money anymore. They were actively terrorizing my beautiful daughter and breaking her heart for pure sport. The trap was officially set, and they were sprinting happily right into the sharp metal jaws. I sat in the dim light of the Obsidian Hotel penthouse, listening to the final click of Darnell hanging up the phone. The heavy satellite receiver felt cold in my trembling hand. The anger was a massive fire in my brain, but my body was losing the brutal physical war. A sudden violent wave of nausea hit me, forcing me to lean heavily over the glass coffee table. My vision swam in dark, dizzying circles, and my chest felt tight like a heavy iron band was crushing my ribs. Trey was sleeping soundly in the massive master bedroom down the hall, completely safe behind solid oak doors and a team of private security guards. I had to stay alive for him. I had to survive this night so he would never have to look at those monsters ever again. A sharp, rhythmic knock at the suite door broke the heavy silence. I pushed myself up from the leather sofa, my knees shaking uncontrollably with the massive effort. I walked slowly to the door, checking the secure video monitor. It was Dr. Carter, my oldest friend, and the chief of surgery at the best hospital in Atlanta. We had served in the military together 40 long years ago, long before I built my massive shipping empire. He carried a heavy black medical case, looking around the luxurious hallway with highly trained, cautious eyes. I opened the door and he stepped inside quickly, locking the deadbolt firmly behind him. "Reginald," he said, taking one look at my pale, sweating face. "You look absolutely terrible, my friend." He did not waste time with polite greetings or useless small talk. He moved the expensive crystal vases off the dining table and opened his heavy black case. He pulled out a portable centrifuge, several sterile needles, and a digital blood analyzer. "Sit down right now," he commanded, pulling a wooden chair out for me. I sat heavily, rolling up the sleeve of my wrinkled dress shirt. Dr. Carter wrapped a tight rubber tourniquet around my upper arm, slapping my skin gently to find a viable vein. "You told Calvin you were being poisoned," Dr. Carter said, sliding the sharp needle smoothly into my arm. He drew 3 large vials of dark, thick blood. I nodded slowly, staring at the dark red liquid filling the glass tubes. "Tasha gives me a glass of warm milk every single night," I explained, my voice sounding weak and incredibly raspy. "She puts heavy nutmeg on top and tells me it is for my heart. She watches me drink every single drop before she lets me go to sleep." Dr. Carter's jaw tightened with silent professional fury. He placed the heavy vials of blood into the portable analyzer, pressing a series of complex buttons on the small digital screen. The machine hummed loudly, spinning the blood, rapidly separating the plasma to find the deadly truth. We waited in the agonizing silence of the penthouse, listening to the mechanical whirring of the small machine. I closed my eyes, picturing Tasha smiling at me, handing me the warm glass while Darnell waited eagerly for my death. The brutal betrayal cut deeper than any knife ever could. Finally, the machine beeped a sharp, high-pitched alarm. A small white piece of paper slid slowly out of the front slot. Dr. Carter ripped it off, reading the tiny black numbers closely. His face went completely white, his eyes widening with pure medical shock. "What is it, Carter?" I asked, bracing myself for the absolute worst. He looked up at me, taking off his reading glasses. "Arsenic," he said, his voice heavy with a grim, terrible certainty. "High levels of chronic arsenic exposure. Reginald, it is completely tasteless, odorless, and highly lethal over time. You have been ingesting this deadly toxin for several months. It is slowly shutting down your major organs, mimicking the exact symptoms of natural heart failure. A few more days of this heavy dosage, maybe 1 more week at most, and your heart would have simply stopped beating in your sleep." The words hit me like a massive freight train. Arsenic. That was her brilliant, evil plan. She was not just waiting for me to die of old age. She was actively murdering me, inch by agonizing inch, hiding the lethal poison beneath the sweet smell of kitchen spices. Tasha had smiled directly in my face, kissed my cheek, and served me a hot glass of death every single night. The absolute cruelty of it was completely staggering to comprehend. "We need to get you to the intensive care unit immediately," Dr. Carter said, packing up his equipment quickly. "You need heavy dialysis and a monitored chelation drip right now, or you will go into sudden cardiac arrest." I shook my head firmly, grabbing his strong wrist to stop him. "No hospitals, Carter," I commanded, refusing to break my gaze. "If I go to a hospital tonight, my name enters the public medical database. Tasha will get the legal notification as my primary emergency contact. She will know that I am alive, and she will know exactly what we found in my blood. I need her to think she has completely won the war today. Reginald." "This is highly dangerous," Dr. Carter argued, his voice rising with genuine concern. "You could easily have a massive seizure sitting right here in this hotel chair." I looked him dead in the eye, channeling every single ounce of the ruthless CEO I used to be. "Treat me right here in this suite," I ordered him. "Hook up the heavy IV bags, give me the pills, and push the antidote directly into my veins. I'm not leaving this secure room until I am strong enough to stand on my own 2 feet and destroy them completely." Dr. Carter stared at me for a long moment, seeing the unbreakable resolve burning deep in my eyes. He sighed heavily, knowing he could never win a stubborn argument with me. He pulled a massive, clear plastic bag of medical fluids from his case, hanging it from the tall brass floor lamp next to the sofa. He inserted a fresh intravenous line into the back of my hand, taping it down securely. "This is going to hurt immensely," he warned me, pushing a large syringe of thick, clear liquid directly into the IV port. "The chelation medicine will aggressively bind to the heavy metals in your blood and force your body to flush the poison out." The cold fluid burned like pure liquid fire, traveling rapidly up my arm and spreading deep into my chest. I clenched my teeth together tightly, gripping the armrests of the chair until the thick leather creaked loudly. I welcomed the intense, blinding pain. It was the absolute proof that I was still alive, still fighting, and still holding the ultimate power. As the heavy medicine fought the deadly poison in my veins, I closed my eyes and prepared my tired body for the brutal, unforgiving war that was coming at sunrise. The clear medical liquid dripped slowly from the heavy IV bag, falling into the plastic tube in a steady, rhythmic cadence. The intense burning in my veins had finally settled into a dull, deep ache. Dr. Carter sat across from me in the quiet hotel suite, checking my pulse every 15 minutes. The heavy curtains of the penthouse were drawn tight, blocking out the bright Atlanta sun, hiding my resurrection from the entire world. I took a deep breath, feeling the heavy fog of the arsenic slowly lifting from my tired brain. A firm, heavy knock rattled the thick wooden door of the suite. Dr. Carter stood up quickly, reaching for the security chain, but I raised my injured hand to stop him. "Let him in, Carter," I said, my voice sounding much stronger now, vibrating with a familiar, dangerous authority. "It is Calvin, and he has the answers we need." Calvin walked into the room wearing a sharp gray suit and carrying a thick leather briefcase. He took one single look at the medical equipment hanging beside my chair and gave a tight, respectful nod. He did not ask unnecessary questions. He pulled up a chair next to my leather recliner and popped the brass latches of his heavy briefcase. He reached inside, pulling out a massive stack of financial documents covered in bright red ink. "I told you to follow the money," Reginald Calvin said, sliding a thick manila folder across the glass coffee table. "And the money tells a very dark, very bloody story today." I picked up the heavy folder, reading the summary on the top pages. It was a complete forensic audit of Darnell Logistics Company, pulled directly from the hidden corporate servers. "What exactly am I looking at?" "Calvin," I asked, flipping through the endless pages of offshore accounts and massive negative balances. "You're looking at a massive empty shell," Calvin explained, leaning forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Darnell does not have any real investors, and he never went to Dallas today. His entire shipping company is a fake front, a complete house of cards built on massive, desperate lies. He has been bleeding heavy cash for 3 solid years." Calvin continued, tapping a specific bank statement with his index finger. "But he did not lose your money in bad business deals. He lost it at the high-stakes poker tables and in the illegal underground sports books. He is in incredibly deep with the local Atlanta syndicate and a very vicious crew out of Las Vegas. How deep is he? I asked, feeling the cold, hard anger tightening my chest. $2.5 million, Calvin said flatly, the massive number hanging heavily in the quiet room. And the juice is running high every single day. They broke his business partner legs last month, dumping him outside a hospital in Midtown. Darnell knows he is absolutely next on their violent list. That is why he was suddenly in such a desperate rush to get his greedy hands on the Jefferson family fortune. But that is not all, Boss Calvin said, pulling out a second highly secure blue folder. Darnell got incredibly desperate 3 months ago, right around the exact time you started feeling sick at night. He forged your digital signature and used his executive access card to embezzle $300,000 from your Western shipping subsidiary. He used that stolen cash to pay the minimum interest on his mob debt just to keep himself breathing for another month. I stared at the forged documents, seeing my own name traced perfectly in black ink. The timeline matched up with terrifying precision. 3 months ago, he stole the corporate funds. He realized he would be caught immediately during the annual spring audit, so he convinced Tasha to start slipping heavy arsenic into my evening milk. They needed me dead and buried deep in the ground before my accountants found the missing cash and sent him to federal prison. He is a dead man walking, Reginald, Calvin said, his voice dropping low with professional certainty. The mob creditors do not care about his pathetic excuses anymore. They gave him a strict final deadline. If he does not pay them back by the end of this week, they are going to kill him, and they are going to go directly after his wife for the remaining balance. He is using your daughter Aaliyah as his personal human shield. The thought of those violent, dangerous men coming anywhere near my sweet daughter Aaliyah made my blood run completely cold. He sent her to the house today, I realized out loud, piecing the sickening puzzle together. He sent my little girl to beg for $50,000 just to buy himself a few more days of breathing room from the killers. Exactly, Calvin agreed, nodding slowly. And since you completely froze his credit cards this morning, he is officially out of options. He is cornered, desperate, and entirely broke. The sharks are already circling the water, smelling the fresh blood. I looked at the thick stack of papers on the glass table. This was not just a case of simple greed anymore. This was a desperate fight for physical survival. Darnell was backed into a very dark corner, making him incredibly dangerous to everyone around him. Keep the Phoenix protocol strictly active, Calvin Y commanded, pulling the IV needle out of my hand with a swift, sharp motion. Dr. Carter jumped forward to stop me, but I waved him off firmly, pressing a white cotton swab against the bleeding puncture wound. Do not let them access a single dime of my money, I said, standing up on unsteady legs, feeling the true power returning to my bones. Let the financial pressure build. Let the mob squeeze him tight until he completely breaks down and panics. Darnell thought he could steal my massive empire just to save his own miserable skin. But he was about to learn that the old mechanic from the south side of Atlanta was far more ruthless than any mobster he owed money to. The dirty yellow taxi pulled up to the massive iron gates of the Jefferson estate. Darnell threw his last crumpled bills at the driver, not even waiting for his proper change. Tasha stormed out of the back seat, her expensive heels clicking angrily on the paved driveway. The hot Atlanta sun was completely unforgiving, but the cold dread in her stomach was much worse. They rushed up the wide marble steps, unlocking the heavy oak front door with trembling hands. The massive house was completely silent, filled with expensive art and imported furniture, but it suddenly felt like a massive empty tomb. Darnell did not even bother to take off his shoes, tracking street dirt onto the pristine white carpets. He sprinted directly toward my private home office, desperate to access the main corporate banking terminals. Get on your laptop right now, Darnell shouted over his shoulder, his voice echoing in the large foyer. Log into your personal accounts, Tasha, and see exactly what is left. Tasha ran to the kitchen island, ripping her sleek silver laptop from her designer bag. She typed her complex passwords with shaking fingers, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The screen loaded slowly, the little blue circle spinning endlessly, mocking her massive anxiety. Finally, the main banking dashboard appeared on the bright screen. Tasha let out a sharp, breathless scream. "What is it?" Darnell yelled, running back into the kitchen, his face completely flushed with sweat. "It is all gone, Darnell," Tasha whispered, pointing a shaking finger at the screen. "Look at it. Look at the numbers." Darnell leaned over the marble island, staring at the digital readout. The joint checking account, which usually held hundreds of thousands of dollars for daily expenses, showed a brutal, flat zero. The massive investment portfolios, the offshore trust funds, the corporate expense accounts, every single line item was completely red. Next to every single account number, a stark black warning flashed. "Frozen by primary account holder." "This is completely impossible," Darnell muttered, gripping the edge of the counter so hard his knuckles turned white. He pulled out his phone, dialing the highly exclusive private banking line, a number reserved only for clients with over $50 million in assets. The line clicked, and a polite, highly trained voice answered immediately. "Welcome to Premium Client Services," the voice said smoothly. "How can I assist you today, Mr. Darnell?" "Listen to me very carefully," Darnell barked, pacing back and forth across the kitchen floor. "There is a massive glitch in your stupid system. Every single account linked to the Jefferson estate is locked. I need you to lift the security hold right this second, or I will personally make sure you lose your job today." There was a brief, highly professional pause on the other end of the line. "I apologize for the inconvenience, sir," the representative said, not sounding apologetic at all. "But there is absolutely no system glitch today. The Phoenix Protocol was officially initiated early this morning." "What the hell is a Phoenix Protocol?" Tasha yelled, leaning close to the phone speaker. "It is a total irrevocable asset freeze," the representative explained calmly. "It can only be triggered by Mr. Reginald Jefferson himself using his secure biometric voice print. All liquid assets, credit lines, and property deeds are completely locked. No funds can be moved, withdrawn, or transferred until Mr. Jefferson personally lifts the strict protocol in person." "But he is sick," Tasha lied desperately, her voice cracking with pure panic. "My husband is completely incapacitated. He does not know what he is doing." "You have to give me emergency access right now. I am his legal wife." "I am deeply sorry, Mrs. Jefferson," the representative replied, a cold edge entering the professional tone. "The legal directives are incredibly clear. Spousal override is completely void under this specific protocol. If you have any further complaints, you will need to direct them to the Jefferson corporate legal team. Have a pleasant day." The line went completely dead, leaving a dial tone that sounded like a flatlining heart monitor. Darnell threw his phone violently against the marble wall, the expensive glass shattering into 100 tiny pieces. He grabbed his hair, pulling it in absolute terrifying frustration. "He is alive!" Darnell screamed, his voice breaking under the massive pressure. "The old man is fully awake and he knows everything." "We are completely dead, Tasha." Tasha leaned back against the counter, sliding down slowly until she hit the cold hardwood floor. She pulled her knees to her chest, rocking back and forth. "But I watched him drink the milk," she whispered, her eyes wide and completely unhinged. "I put the powder in the glass myself, Darnell. He should be completely paralyzed right now. He should be dying." "Well, he is not dying," Darnell roared, kicking a heavy wooden bar stool across the kitchen. It crashed into the stainless steel refrigerator, leaving a massive, ugly dent. "He is sitting somewhere right now laughing at us." He cut off the money, Tasha. "Do you understand what that actually means? The men I owe money to, they do not care about a Phoenix Protocol. They only care about cash, and if I do not have it by tomorrow, they are going to put a bullet directly in my head." Tasha looked up at him, her face twisting into a mask of pure selfish survival. Then you better run. Darnell, she said coldly, because if those violent men come to this beautiful house, I'm going to tell them exactly where you sleep. This is your massive debt, not mine. Darnell stepped toward her, his eyes flashing with a violent, dangerous light. Do not play games with me, Tasha, he warned her, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. We are in this together. You bought the poison. You fed it to him. If I go down for this massive mess, I am dragging you right down into the mud with me. They stared at each other, the toxic illusion of their wealthy romance completely shattered. The massive house, the expensive clothes, the imported cars. It was all a useless trap now. The well was completely dry, and the brutal thirst of their own making was about to tear them apart. The heavy silence in the pristine kitchen was suddenly broken by a massive, violent pounding on the solid oak front door. The loud noise echoed like brutal thunder through the empty, frozen estate. Tasha jumped up from the hardwood floor, her eyes wide with a brand new, immediate terror. Darnell froze completely in his tracks, the shattered pieces of his expensive phone crunching loudly under his designer shoes. Who is that? Tasha whispered, her voice shaking violently. Did you call someone else to help us, Darnell? I did not call anyone. Darnell hissed back, his face draining of whatever color it had left. He crept slowly toward the massive digital security panel mounted carefully on the marble wall. He tapped the glowing screen, pulling up the live video feed from the heavy front porch. His breath caught sharply in his throat, a cold, sickening lump forming deep in his chest. Standing right on my expensive welcome mat were 3 massive, broad-shouldered men. They did not look like friendly neighbors or polite corporate lawyers. They wore cheap dark suits that stretched tightly over thick layers of heavy muscle. The man standing directly in the center had a thick, brutal scar running straight down his left cheek. He raised a heavy, calloused fist and pounded on the thick oak door again, rattling the expensive stained glass windows. Oh my God, Darnell breathed out, taking a large, terrified step back from the glowing screen. It is them, Tasha. It is the collectors from the underground sports book. They finally found me. Tasha looked at the bright screen and then she looked directly at Darnell. Her sharp survival instinct, entirely cold and completely selfish, kicked into high gear instantly. She did not grab her husband to protect him. She did not offer to hide him in the secure panic room upstairs. She smoothed out her wrinkled designer dress and walked right past him, heading straight for the massive front door. What are you doing? Darnell screamed in a harsh whisper, reaching out to violently grab her arm. Do not open that door, Tasha. They will kill me right here in the main hallway. Get your hands off me. Tasha snapped coldly, ripping her arm away from his weak grip. This is your massive debt, Darnell, not mine. I'm not going to let a bunch of violent street thugs break down my beautiful custom door. I'm going to let them in, and you are going to explain exactly why your pockets are completely empty today. Before Darnell could even try to stop her, Tasha grabbed the heavy brass handle and pulled the front door wide open. The bright Atlanta sunlight flooded the cool, dark foyer, illuminating the 3 highly dangerous men standing right on the concrete porch. The scarred leader did not wait for a polite invitation. He stepped right past Tasha, pushing his heavy frame into the grand hallway, acting like he already owned the entire estate. His 2 massive enforcers followed right behind him, their hard, cold eyes scanning the expensive artwork and the massive crystal chandeliers hanging from the ceiling. Well, look at this beautiful palace, the scarred leader said, his rough voice echoing off the high vaulted ceilings. You live like a literal King Darnell, but you pay your heavy debts like a completely broke college student. Darnell backed away slowly, his expensive leather shoes slipping slightly on the highly polished marble floor. Listen to me very carefully, Darnell stammered, holding his shaking hands up in a desperate, defensive gesture. I have the heavy money coming. I swear to you the wire transfer is just delayed by a stupid banking protocol. My father-in-law locked the major accounts, but I am fixing it right now. The leader laughed a dark, incredibly humorless sound that made the hair on Darnell's arms stand straight up. Do not lie to me, Darnell, the leader said, stepping closer, closing the physical distance between them. We have highly paid friends inside your fancy corporate bank. We know all about the Phoenix Protocol today. We know you are completely locked out, and we know your credit cards are getting snipped in half at the local mall. You are completely broke, son. Tasha stood near the open door, crossing her arms highly defensively. He promised he would pay you, Tasha said, trying to sound extremely tough, but her voice betrayed her deep, shaking fear. Take his expensive sports car out front. It is worth over $200,000. We already checked the registration on the car, lady, one of the massive enforcers growled deeply, stepping toward Tasha to brutally intimidate her. It does not belong to him at all. It belongs to Reginald Jefferson, and it just got repossessed an hour ago. He owns absolutely nothing. The scarred leader lunged forward suddenly, grabbing Darnell forcefully by the collar of my expensive cashmere sweater. He slammed Darnell hard right against the decorative wooden paneling of the long hallway. Darnell let out a loud, pathetic gasp, choking violently on his own sheer terror. Listen to me, you pathetic lying rat, the leader whispered dangerously close to Darnell's ear. You owe us $2.5 million, and the patience of my heavy boss ran out exactly yesterday. We do not care about your frozen corporate accounts. We do not care if you have to rob a bank or sell your own kidneys on the black market to get our cash. The leader reached casually into his dark jacket, pulling out a heavy black steel pistol. He did not point it at Darnell's head. He simply pressed the cold, hard barrel directly against Darnell's left kneecap. Darnell squeezed his eyes shut tightly, massive tears of pure, absolute panic streaming down his flushed face. Please do not shoot me, Darnell begged, openly sobbing right in front of the violent men and his highly terrified mother-in-law. I will find the hidden money today. I know the old man has massive emergency cash hidden deep inside this large house. Just give me one more day to tear the walls completely apart. The leader smiled cruelly, pressing the heavy steel barrel just a little bit harder into the fragile joint. You have exactly 24 hours, Darnell, the leader announced, his voice totally devoid of any human mercy. Tomorrow night at exactly midnight, we are coming back to this beautiful estate. If you do not have a heavy bag filled with our cash, I am going to shoot you in both of your knees. And then I'm going to let my boys take whatever they want from your beautiful wife, Aaliyah. The leader released his tight grip, instantly letting Darnell completely collapse onto the hard marble floor. Darnell curled into a pathetic, heavily shaking ball, gasping for air like a dying fish on a dry dock. The three men turned around slowly, walking back out the open front door. They walked down the long, paved driveway, completely unafraid of the broad daylight, entirely confident in their absolute violent power. Tasha slammed the heavy front door shut, locking the thick deadbolt with completely shaking hands. She leaned against the solid wood, sliding down slowly until she was sitting on the floor right across from Darnell. The brutal, incredibly violent reality of their massive failure was finally sitting right inside their beautiful living room. They had exactly 24 hours to find my hidden emergency money, or they were both going to die a highly painful, incredibly violent death. The heavy oak door was securely locked, but the terrifying echo of the violent mobsters still rang loudly in the grand foyer. Darnell pushed himself up from the cold marble floor, his entire body shaking uncontrollably. His expensive designer suit was completely wrinkled, stained with his own cold sweat and the sheer terror of his impending execution. He wiped his face with trembling hands, staring wildly at the massive, empty house. We have exactly 24 hours. Tasha Darnell screamed, his voice cracking violently under the massive pressure. 24 hours before they come back here and put a bullet directly into my kneecaps. We need to find the old man hid in cash right now. Tasha scrambled to her feet, her own survival instinct taking complete control over her racing mind. Reginald always kept emergency money in the house, she said, quickly pacing the long hallway like a trapped, desperate animal. He did not trust the corporate banks with everything. He told me once he kept a massive reserve of physical bills just in case the entire market crashed. We need to tear this entire place apart until we find every single dollar. Darnell did not wait for another command. He sprinted frantically down the long corridor, heading straight for my private, highly secure home office. Tasha ran right behind him, her expensive heels abandoned on the marble floor, completely forgotten in the brutal rush for absolute survival. Darnell burst through the heavy mahogany doors of my office, scanning the dark wood shelves and the massive leather furniture. He grabbed the heavy brass lamp from my desk and swept it violently onto the floor. The expensive glass shade shattered into 100 pieces, but he did not care. He was looking for false bottoms, hidden compartments, and secret wall-to safes. "Where's the main safe?" Tasha Darnell demanded, ripping heavy leather-bound books off the tall shelves. "Tell me exactly where he hides the big money." Tasha ran to the far wall, pointing directly at a large, expensive oil painting of our family. "It is right behind that stupid picture," she yelled, her breath coming in short, ragged gasps. "He installed a heavy steel vault 10 years ago. I saw him put a massive stack of $100 bills inside it right before we went to Europe last summer." Darnell lunged at the wall, ripping the heavy oil painting off the secure hooks. The heavy frame crashed to the hardwood floor, the canvas tearing violently on the sharp corners. Behind the painting, a thick, dark gray steel keypad was set deep into the wall. Darnell stared at the blank buttons, completely clueless. "What is the exact code?" Tasha Darnell screamed, slamming his fist hard against the solid steel door. "Open it right now!" Tasha pushed him out of the way, her fingers flying desperately over the heavy metal buttons. She punched in my birth date, followed by the specific year I founded Jefferson Logistics. The small digital light above the keypad blinked green, and a loud, satisfying click echoed in the destroyed office. The heavy steel door popped open just a fraction of an inch. Darnell shoved her aside, instantly ripping the heavy door wide open. He reached his shaking hands deep into the dark, secure vault, expecting to feel massive stacks of banded cash or heavy velvet bags filled with flawless diamonds. Instead, his hands grasped nothing but empty, useless air. He pulled out a single thin red folder. He ripped the folder open, shaking the contents desperately onto the floor. It was just a stack of highly complex, entirely useless legal documents. There were old property deeds, canceled life insurance policies, and outdated corporate tax returns. There was absolutely no cash. There were no diamonds. The massive, secure vault was completely, entirely empty. "Where's the money?" Tasha Darnell roared, turning around with pure murder in his wide, panicked eyes. "You said it was right here. You said he kept massive cash." "I do not know!" Tasha shrieked, falling to her knees to sift frantically through the useless papers. "He must have moved it, Darnell. He must have known we were watching him. We have to keep looking right now. It has to be hidden somewhere else in this massive house." Darnell lost his mind completely. The absolute ticking clock of his own violent death drove him into a massive, destructive frenzy. He grabbed a sharp, heavy metal letter opener from my desk. He ran over to my favorite custom leather reading chair. He plunged the sharp metal blade directly into the soft leather, ripping a massive, ugly hole right down the middle of the expensive cushion. He tore the white stuffing out with his bare hands, throwing it violently into the air like a terrible snowstorm. He slashed the heavy sofa, ripping the thick fabric completely apart, searching desperately for a hidden bag of cash. He moved to the walls, taking the heavy brass fireplace poker and smashing it directly into the drywall. He hammered huge, jagged holes into the pristine white walls, hoping to find a secret compartment hidden behind the expensive paint. Tasha ran upstairs, leaving Darnell to destroy the lower level. She burst into our massive master bedroom, tearing the heavy imported silk sheets right off the large bed. She grabbed a pair of heavy scissors and stabbed them repeatedly into the thick memory foam mattress. She ripped the expensive foam apart, looking for any hidden envelopes of cash. She emptied every single drawer of my tall wooden dresser, throwing my expensive clothes violently onto the floor, checking every single pocket and every single dark corner. They worked for 3 agonizing, exhausting hours. They moved through the massive estate like a terrible, highly destructive hurricane. They shattered expensive crystal vases looking for rolled-up bills. They ripped the heavy carpets up from the hard wooden floors, searching for loose floorboards. They completely decimated the beautiful, peaceful sanctuary I had built for my family. Finally, the brutal exhaustion caught up to them. Darnell stumbled back into the living room, his hands bleeding from the sharp glass, his breathing heavy and totally ragged. He collapsed onto the ruined, slashed leather sofa, dropping the heavy brass poker onto the floor. Tasha walked slowly down the grand staircase, her expensive dress torn, her perfect hair a massive, chaotic mess. She looked at the absolute destruction they had caused. The house looked like a violent war zone, and they had found exactly nothing. Not a single dollar bill, not a single hidden reserve. I had moved all the emergency cash weeks ago, the exact moment I realized they were plotting against me. "We are completely dead," Darnell whispered, staring blankly at the ruined white ceiling. "The old man took everything, Tasha. He completely outsmarted us. They are going to kill me tomorrow, and then they are going to come directly for you." Tasha stood in the center of the ruined living room, staring at the terrible wreckage. She did not cry. She did not panic anymore. The pure, absolute desperation had finally burned away, leaving behind a cold, incredibly vicious determination. She was not going to let a bunch of violent mobsters end her wealthy life. She was not going to lose the massive empire. "No, Darnell, Tasha," said her voice, dropping to a deadly, totally emotionless whisper. "We are not dead yet. The money is locked in the corporate trust, and Reginald is the only one who can legally open it. If we cannot find his hidden cash today, then we have to take the entire corporate key directly from his hands." "How?" Darnell asked, looking at her with hollow, entirely defeated eyes. "He locked the accounts. He is hiding somewhere in the city. We cannot even find him, Tasha. We do not need to find him, Darnell." Tasha replied, a dark, wicked smile slowly forming on her lips. "He is an old, deeply sick man. When the medical authorities realize he is completely out of his mind, they will give the legal power directly to his devoted wife. We just need to make sure the entire world believes that Reginald Jefferson has completely lost his mind." Tasha stepped carefully over the torn leather cushions, walking right through the absolute destruction of our massive living room. She did not look like a defeated woman anymore. She looked like a highly venomous snake, coiling tightly, preparing for a deadly strike. Darnell watched her from the ruined sofa, his broken spirit clinging desperately to her sudden dark confidence. "How do we take the corporate key?" Tasha Darnell asked, his voice shaking with a pathetic, hollow hope. "The bank said the Phoenix Protocol is completely ironclad. They said no one can touch the money except Reginald himself." Tasha laughed, a dry, cruel sound that echoed off the damaged, dry wall. "The bank is legally bound to respect a sane man, Darnell," she explained, her eyes wide with a manic, highly calculated brilliance. "But what happens when the primary account holder loses his mind entirely? What happens when the great Reginald Jefferson is officially declared medically incompetent by a licensed medical board?" Darnell sat up slowly, the heavy gears finally turning in his desperate, panicked brain. "Conservatorship," he whispered, the single word hanging in the dusty air like a dark, terrible spell. "If he is legally senile, the court appoints a legal guardian to manage the entire estate." "Exactly," Tasha said, stepping closer to him, her face twisting into a mask of pure greed. "I am his legal wife, Darnell. I am his closest living relative." If a Supreme Court judge declares him entirely unfit to manage his own massive empire, the strict banking protocols are immediately dissolved. The Phoenix Freeze is legally shattered and they hand the entire kingdom directly to me. But we have to actually find him first. Darnell argued, his sudden hope warring with his massive, lingering terror. He ran away, Tasha. He is hiding somewhere in the city, probably talking to his highly paid corporate lawyers right now. If he goes to the police, we are completely ruined before we even file the medical papers. He will not go to the police today, Tasha said confidently, waving her hand in complete arrogant dismissal. Think about it, Darnell. If he was strong enough to fight us publicly, he would have brought the cops to the front door this morning. He would have thrown us out of the estate himself. But he did not do that. He ran away in the middle of the night like a scared, highly paranoid old man. She paced across the ruined floor, her high heels crunching on the broken glass of our expensive family portraits. The arsenic's already working, Darnell, she continued, her voice dropping to a dark, totally evil whisper. He's been drinking the heavy poison for 3 solid months. His brain is literally melting. His body is completely shutting down. He probably woke up confused, stumbled out of the house and called the bank in a massive paranoid delusion. We just need to find him before he actually dies on the street. And then what, Darnell asked, rubbing his sweaty face with his shaking hands. We just drag him back to the house and call a random doctor to lock him away forever. No, Tasha corrected him sharply. We play the part of the deeply terrified, highly loving family. We call the police ourselves Darnell. We file a massive missing persons report today. We tell the detectives that my elderly husband has severe dementia and he wandered away from home during a violent manic episode. We tell them he is highly unstable, deeply paranoid, and a massive danger to himself. When they finally find him, he will look completely crazy, ranting about poison and stolen money. No one will ever believe a single word he says. Darnell smiled, a slow, incredibly vicious grin spreading across his face. It was the smile of a desperate coward who just found a brand new, highly loaded weapon. The underground mob gives me exactly 24 hours. Darnell said, his voice gaining a sudden, dangerous strength. If we can get a judge to sign the emergency medical papers by tomorrow afternoon, I can walk into the main bank, wire the cash to the violent collectors, and save my own life. We will save both our lives, Darnell, Tasha said, grabbing his face with her manicured hands. And then we will lock that old fool in a cheap medical facility and we will spend his billions until the day he finally stops breathing. Sitting in the quiet, highly secure penthouse of the Obsidian Hotel, I listened to every single word of their vicious, completely evil plot. Calvin sat across from me, his face a mask of pure professional disgust. The hidden microphones in my ruined living room transmitted their terrible voices with crystal clear, absolute perfection. They are going to try and lock you in a padded room, boss, Calvin said quietly, shaking his head in absolute disbelief. They want to steal your entire life by claiming you lost your mind. I leaned back in the heavy leather chair, feeling the absolute cold clarity of a man who has completely accepted his dark mission. They want a helpless, senile old man, Calvin, I said, a dangerous, incredibly dark smile forming on my lips. They want a broken victim who cannot speak for himself. They want me weak, confused, and entirely trapped in a medical bed. What are you going to do, Reginald Calvin? Asked, leaning forward, sensing the massive shift in my entire demeanor. I'm going to give them exactly what they want, I replied, my voice rumbling with a heavy, unstoppable power. They built a massive, highly illegal trap today, Calvin, but they do not realize that I'm the one holding the heavy steel door wide open for them. Call Dr. Carter right now. Tell him to prepare the most convincing medical performance of his entire career. We are going to stage a massive physical collapse, and we are going to let them carry me right back into the terrible snake pit. The heavy oak doors of the penthouse swung open, and Dr. Carter walked rapidly back into the secure room. He carried a different medical bag, this time a heavy silver case filled with highly specialized, incredibly dangerous pharmaceuticals. I sat in the leather chair, staring out the massive glass window, watching the busy Atlanta traffic moving far below us. Calvin stood quietly by the door, his arms crossed over his chest, ready to execute the next phase of our dark, calculated war. "They want to play a dirty legal game, Carter," I said, turning my chair slowly to face the brilliant surgeon. "They want to declare me medically incompetent to shatter the Phoenix Protocol and steal my entire life. I need you to help me become the exact vegetable they are praying for today." Dr. Carter set the silver case heavily on the glass table. He popped the metal latches, revealing rows of small glass vials and sterile plastic syringes. "Reginald, this is completely insane," Dr. Carter said, shaking his head in deep medical concern. "You are asking me to induce a massive, highly realistic physical collapse. I have to lower your heart rate to a dangerously slow rhythm and temporarily paralyze your voluntary motor functions. If I miscalculate the exact dosage, you could actually die on that pavement." "I'm already dead to them, Carter," I replied, my voice completely cold and entirely empty of fear. "They murdered me in my own dining room last night. Now I need to come back as a silent, terrifying ghost. Do it right now." Dr. Carter sighed heavily, knowing the deep, unbreakable stubbornness in my soul. He prepared a very specific, highly potent chemical cocktail. It was a precise mixture of heavy sedatives and a mild synthetic paralytic designed specifically to mimic the devastating aftermath of a massive stroke combined with severe arsenic poisoning. Calvin pulled out his secure encrypted phone. "I'm calling Detective Miller at the downtown precinct," Calvin said, typing a direct number into the keypad. "Miller owes you his entire career, Reginald, for that legal financial help you gave him 10 years ago. He's a good, honest cop. I will have him waiting exactly at the corner of Peachtree Street. We will stage the massive collapse right in his patrol sector so he can personally secure the scene and bypass the normal emergency dispatch protocol. It was a brilliant, flawless plan." I rolled up my sleeve one more time. Dr. Carter swabbed my skin with a cold alcohol pad. "Listen to me very carefully," Reginald, Dr. Carter instructed, looking me directly in the eyes. "When this specific drug hits your bloodstream, you are going to feel a massive, terrifying weight pressing down on your entire body. You will not be able to speak, you will not be able to move your arms, and your vision will completely blur. You will be entirely trapped inside your own mind, completely at the absolute mercy of the people around you." I nodded slowly, accepting the heavy, dangerous burden. "I have survived a brutal war in the thick jungle. Carter," I said softly, "I can easily survive a few days in a soft hospital bed. Give me the heavy shot today." He pushed the clear liquid directly into my vein. I did not flinch at all. We moved quickly, leaving the secure luxury of the penthouse suite. Calvin supported my heavy weight, walking me down the private service elevator, completely avoiding the busy hotel lobby. We loaded into my battered, rusty truck parked discreetly in the back loading dock. Calvin drove fast through the busy Atlanta streets. I could already feel the heavy drug taking complete control of my tired body. My tongue felt thick and entirely useless. My eyelids drooped heavily, fighting a massive, unnatural gravity. The bright city lights began to smear into long, blinding streaks of confusing color. We pulled up to a busy, crowded intersection in the very heart of downtown. Detective Miller was already parked near the curb, his police cruiser idling quietly, watching the busy sidewalk with sharp, highly trained eyes. Calvin stopped the heavy truck abruptly. "It is time to put on the absolute best show of your entire life, Boss Calvin," whispered, reaching over to open my heavy passenger door. "I will see you on the exact other side of this massive storm." I stumbled out of the heavy truck. My legs felt like useless melted rubber. I walked 3 agonizing, completely uncoordinated steps onto the crowded concrete sidewalk. I let out a loud, highly convincing groan of pure physical agony. I clutched my chest violently, staging a massive, terrifying heart failure. The heavy paralytic drug hit my brain like a massive steel sledgehammer. I collapsed hard onto the dirty pavement. My head bounced slightly against the solid concrete, sending a sharp, brilliant flash of real pain through my heavy skull. The busy crowds of innocent pedestrians gasped loudly, parting quickly in a massive wave of sudden panic. People started screaming, pulling out their expensive cell phones to record the tragic falling man. Detective Miller ran over instantly, pushing his heavy frame through the massive, terrified crowd. "Stand back right now," Miller shouted, acting his professional part, perfectly keying the heavy radio on his broad shoulder. I need emergency medical services at my exact location. We have a senior male completely unresponsive on the pavement. I lay there on the cold, filthy street surrounded by starting strangers. My breathing slowed to a shallow, terrifying crawl. My eyes were half open, staring blankly at the bright blue Atlanta sky, completely unable to blink or focus. I heard the loud, approaching wail of the emergency ambulance sirens cutting sharply through the noisy city traffic. The trap was completely perfectly set. I was no longer the powerful billionaire CEO of Jefferson Logistics. I was just a broken, entirely helpless old man waiting for his loving, highly greedy wife to come and claim his pathetic, dying body. I let the deep darkness pull me completely under, waiting patiently for the brutal hospital performance to officially begin. The harsh, sterile light of the intensive care unit pierced right through my heavy eyelids. I lay entirely motionless on a stiff, narrow hospital bed, surrounded by a massive, beeping wall of advanced medical machinery. The powerful synthetic paralytic flowing deep in my veins kept my limbs completely locked in place. I could not move my strong hands, I could not turn my head, and I could not speak a single word. I was entirely a prisoner trapped deep inside my own heavy bones, breathing only because a clear plastic tube was pushing oxygen directly into my lungs. But my mind was incredibly sharp, fully awake, and watching every single shadow in the cold room. The heavy glass door of my private room slid open with a sudden violent screech. I heard the loud, completely frantic clicking of expensive designer heels rushing across the polished linoleum floor. Tasha burst into the room, unleashing a massive, incredibly theatrical wail of pure agony that echoed loudly down the quiet hospital corridor. She threw herself dramatically over the metal railing of my hospital bed, burying her face directly into my white cotton blankets. "Oh my God!" Reginald, Tasha screamed, her voice shaking with absolute fake devastation. "Please, do not leave me, baby!" She sobbed, ensuring the 2 young nurses standing near the door could see her massive performance. "I cannot live without you," she cried out, clutching my motionless arm with her manicured fingers. Darnell walked into the room right behind her, acting the part of the deeply concerned, highly supportive son-in-law. He placed a heavy, comforting hand on Tasha's shoulder, looking down at my frozen, helpless face with a completely fake expression of deep family sorrow. But I could easily see the absolute pure relief shining brightly in his wide, greedy eyes. He looked at my paralyzed body, and he did not see a dying father or a beloved husband. He saw a massive, golden ticket out of his violent mob debt lying conveniently helpless on a hospital bed. Dr. Carter walked slowly into the room, wearing a long, pristine white medical coat, holding a heavy metal clipboard in his hands. He looked at Tasha and Darnell, his face a complete, absolute mask of deep professional tragedy. He was the greatest doctor in Atlanta, and today he was also the absolute best actor in the entire building. "Mrs. Jefferson," Dr. Carter said gently, his voice low and incredibly soothing. I need you to please step back for a moment so we can properly discuss your husband's massive medical event. Tasha pulled her head up from my blankets, wiping away completely invisible tears from her dry, perfectly powdered cheeks. She grabbed Darnell, hand tightly leaning against him for fake emotional support. "What happened to my husband, Dr. Tasha?" asked her voice trembling like a deeply terrified innocent child. "The police said he completely collapsed on the sidewalk today." Dr. Carter sighed heavily, looking directly at his detailed medical chart. "Reginald suffered a massive, catastrophic brainstem trauma this afternoon," Dr. Carter explained, delivering the devastating fake news with absolute perfection. "We ran extensive blood tests, and we found deeply alarming levels of a highly toxic substance, likely from a severe environmental exposure built up in his system over several months." Tasha gasped loudly, her hand flying up to cover her mouth in pure staged horror. Darnell shifted his weight nervously, knowing exactly what that specific toxin actually was. The combination of the heavy toxins and the massive stroke completely severed the critical connection between his conscious brain and his physical body, Dr. Carter continued smoothly. "His heart is still beating strong and his lungs are fully functioning, but he is completely paralyzed from the neck down. We call this specific tragic condition locked-in syndrome." The quiet hospital room went completely, absolutely silent. The heavy rhythmic beeping of my heart monitor was the only sound in the cold, sterile air. "What does that exactly mean?" Darnell asked, pushing exactly for the specific legal confirmation he desperately needed to survive. "It means he will never walk, talk, or move ever again," Dr. Carter said, staring right at Darnell. "He's entirely awake inside his own mind. He can likely hear us talking right now and he can partially see us, but he has absolutely no physical way to ever respond. He is legally and medically incapacitated, completely requiring round-the-clock, 24-hour total care for the absolute rest of his natural life." Tasha let out another loud, incredibly dramatic wail of fake despair. "No," she cried out, burying her face into Darnell's shoulder. "That is a massive nightmare. That is a terrible prison for my strong husband." But I was watching her face closely through the tiny, narrow slits of my half-open eyes. As she buried her face against Darnell's expensive suit jacket, entirely hidden from the doctor and the nurses, I saw it clearly. I saw the slow, wicked, totally evil smile stretching widely across her greedy lips. It was the massive, deeply satisfied smile of a ruthless hunter who just caught the ultimate prey. She had absolutely everything she needed now. I was legally a vegetable, completely unable to fight her in a formal courtroom, entirely incapable of lifting the strict Phoenix protocol myself. She was the devoted, grieving wife ready to sign the heavy medical papers and take complete, total control of my billions. Dr. Carter looked down at me, sharing a brief, completely invisible look of absolute solidarity. We had successfully handed them the sharp, heavy shovel. Now we just had to lay completely still and watch them dig their own massive, inescapable grave. The silence in the intensive care unit was heavy, broken only by the rhythmic beep of my heart monitor. Dr. Carter stood at the foot of my narrow bed, looking at the two monsters holding hands right in front of my paralyzed face. "This is going to require immense physical labor," Dr. Carter explained, his voice projecting deep medical concern. "He will need a feeding tube constant turning to prevent bed sores in a highly sterile environment. The state strongly recommends a specialized long-term care facility for patients in this severe condition." Tasha shook her head violently, her eyes wide with a perfectly practiced fake maternal horror. She cried out, stepping closer to my bed. "I will absolutely never put my strong husband in some cold, lonely facility. I am his devoted wife, and I am going to take care of him myself." Darnell nodded firmly, playing his part in the grand evil theater. "We have a massive, fully equipped estate," Darnell added, adjusting his expensive silk tie. "We can easily hire private nurses and convert the main living room into a sterile hospital suite. Reginald deserves to be surrounded by his loving family in the exact house he built. I lay completely motionless, staring blankly at the bright fluorescent lights on the ceiling. I knew exactly what she was actually doing. Tasha did not want to feed me or turn me or comfort me. She wanted a captive audience for her ultimate wicked victory. If I stayed in a public hospital, there would be strict visiting hours, curious nurses, and formal medical records. But if she took me back to the isolated, massive estate, she would have absolute, completely unchecked control over my helpless body. She could bring her corrupt lawyers right to my bedside. She could file the conservatorship papers claiming she was my exhausted, fully dedicated caregiver. And most importantly, she could physically torture me in complete total privacy. "Are you entirely sure about this, Mrs. Jefferson?" Dr. Carter asked, crossing his arms over his white medical coat. "This is a massive, incredibly heavy burden for a grieving family." "I am completely sure," Dr. Tasha said, leaning over my bed, bringing her face dangerously close to mine. "I will never leave his side. I will watch over him every single minute of every single day." She reached out, gently stroking my cold cheek with her manicured hand. To the young nurses standing in the hallway, it looked like a beautiful, incredibly tender gesture of deep marital love, but her sharp fingernails dug brutally, painfully deep into my jawline. I could not flinch. I could not pull away. I just stared straight ahead, a complete prisoner in my own skin, as she smiled her dark, venomous smile. "We are going to have so much fun together, baby," Tasha whispered softly, her voice so low only I could hear the terrible, cruel promise. "Just you and me trapped in that big, beautiful house." Dr. Carter sighed heavily, pulling a thick stack of legal release forms from his heavy metal clipboard. "If that is your absolute final decision," Dr. Carter said, handing her a black ink pen, "sign these papers right here. I will arrange for a private medical transport to take him back to your estate this evening." Tasha grabbed the pen eagerly, signing her name with rapt, deeply excited strokes. She was legally signing my life away, claiming her massive golden prize. Darnell patted her shoulder, his eyes darting frantically to the large clock on the hospital wall. He was thinking about the violent mobsters and the ticking 24-hour deadline. "Let us go home," Tasha Darnell said nervously. "We have a lot of important legal calls to make today." They walked out of the sterile room, leaving me completely alone with Dr. Carter. The heavy glass door slid shut, cutting off their excited, incredibly greedy voices. Dr. Carter stepped closer to my bed, looking down at my frozen face. He checked the clear IV line, making sure the synthetic paralytic was flowing perfectly into my bloodstream. "You are entering the absolute belly of the beast tonight," Reginald, Dr. Carter whispered, his voice filled with genuine deep concern. "I cannot physically protect you inside that house. If she decides to hold a heavy pillow over your face, you will have absolutely no way to fight back." I blinked my eyes twice, the only small physical movement the heavy drug allowed. It was our secure, prearranged signal. It meant I understood the massive risk, and I was completely ready for the brutal war. I did not fear the belly of the beast. I was the heavy poison sneaking directly into its dark, greedy stomach. 4 hours later, the private ambulance backed slowly up my long paved driveway. The strong paramedics rolled my heavy metal stretcher right through the thick oak front doors of my estate. The house was exactly as they had left it. It was a completely destroyed, heavily vandalized wreckage. The expensive leather sofas were slashed to ribbons. The massive oil paintings were ripped from the damaged walls. The floor was completely covered in broken crystal and jagged drywall dust. The paramedics looked around in pure shock, carefully rolling my stretcher over the terrible, violent debris. "What happened here, Mom?" one of the paramedics asked, setting up a heavy metal hospital bed right in the center of the ruined living room. "We had a terrible break-in last night," Tasha lied smoothly, not missing a single beat. "It is exactly what caused my poor husband to have his massive stroke. We have not even had time to clean it up yet." The paramedics nodded sympathetically, lifting my heavy, completely useless body off the stretcher and placing me onto the stiff medical mattress. They hooked up a basic feeding tube and connected a standard heart monitor to my chest. They gave Tasha a short list of care instructions and walked quickly out the front door, eager to leave the highly disturbing, completely ruined house. The heavy lock clicked shut with a loud, final echo. The massive estate was completely sealed off from the outside world. I was officially trapped in the center of my own destroyed living room, lying helplessly in a cold metal bed. Tasha walked over to the tall windows, pulling the heavy silk curtains tightly shut, blocking out the last fading rays of the setting Atlanta sun. The real brutal nightmare was officially ready to begin. The heavy rumble of the diesel ambulance engine faded slowly into the quiet Atlanta night. Tasha stood completely still right by the massive oak front door, listening intently to the absolute silence of the estate. The moment she was absolutely sure the paramedics were gone, her entire posture shifted violently. The fake grieving widow vanished into thin air, entirely replaced by a cold, calculating predator. She did not wipe away a single tear because there were absolutely none to wipe. She turned around slowly, walking with deliberate, heavy steps toward my metal hospital bed. The rhythmic electronic beep of my heart monitor echoed loudly in the ruined, totally destroyed living room. She stood directly over me, blocking out the dim light of the crystal chandelier. She stared down into my half-open eyes, searching deeply for any tiny spark of highly conscious life. "Are you still in there, Reginald?" Tasha whispered, her voice completely flat, completely devoid of any human empathy. "The brilliant doctor said you might actually be awake, trapped deep inside your own heavy skull. I really truly hope you are awake right now. I hope you can hear every single word I say today." She reached out her hand and pinched the soft skin of my cheek, twisting it sharply, incredibly painfully. The heavy synthetic drug Dr. Carter gave me kept my facial muscles completely, entirely frozen. I did not flinch, I did not blink, and I did not cry out. I lay there like a heavy slab of cold marble. Tasha laughed, a harsh, incredibly wicked sound that sent a massive chill straight down my paralyzed spine. "You are absolutely pathetic," she spat, dropping her hand in pure, total disgust. "You thought you could lock the money away from me. You thought you were so smart running away to the city. But look at you now, baby. You are just a useless, broken piece of expensive furniture." Darnell walked slowly out of the massive kitchen, his heavy leather shoes crunching loudly on the broken glass covering the hardwood floor. He was holding a large, incredibly expensive bottle of my vintage scotch imported directly from Scotland. He did not bother using a crystal glass. He took a massive, greedy pull straight from the glass bottle, wiping his mouth with the back of his shaking hand. "Is the vegetable finally comfortable?" Darnell asked loudly, his voice thick with highly expensive alcohol and a massive, lingering terror. He walked over to the narrow hospital bed, standing right next to his wicked mother-in-law. "He is completely out of it, Darnell," Tasha said confidently, running her hand through her messy hair. "We have absolute total control of the entire board now. I emailed my highly corrupt corporate lawyers the exact moment we left the hospital lobby. They are drafting the emergency conservatorship papers right this second. The judge will sign them first thing tomorrow morning, and the Phoenix Protocol will be completely, entirely shattered." Darnell let out a heavy, incredibly ragged sigh of pure relief. He leaned over my paralyzed body, bringing his face dangerously, uncomfortably close to mine. I could easily smell the sharp, highly potent scotch on his breath, mixed entirely with the sour, ugly stench of his deep panic. "You hear that, old man?" Darnell sneered, his eyes wide and completely bloodshot. "You lose the game today. I am going to walk right into your fancy bank tomorrow afternoon, and I'm going to wire $2.5 million of your hard-earned money directly to the violent men who want to kill me, and then I'm going to take whatever's left and leave this entire miserable city behind." He tilted the heavy glass bottle, pouring a small, highly insulting splash of the expensive amber liquid directly onto my pale face. The strong alcohol stung my eyes sharply, running slowly down my cheek, pooling uncomfortably in the collar of my hospital gown. I held my breath, forcing my entire body to remain entirely limp. Every single muscle in my chest screamed to rise up to grab his throat and crush his windpipe completely. But I remembered the tiny hidden cameras Calvin had carefully placed inside the dark air vents. I remembered that every single insult, every single cruel action was being perfectly recorded in high-definition video. Tasha did not stop him. She simply watched him humiliate me, smiling a dark, deeply satisfied smile. She turned to Darnell, her eyes flashing with a sudden, highly toxic desire. "We have the entire house to ourselves tonight. Baby." Tasha purred softly, running her manicured hands directly down the front of his wrinkled dress shirt. "The old fool cannot do absolutely anything to stop us now." Darnell smiled back at her, his massive ego suddenly inflating completely, fueled by the heavy alcohol and his brand new stolen power. He grabbed her by the waist, pulling her roughly against his chest. They kissed deeply, a passionate, incredibly vulgar display of absolute betrayal standing less than 3 feet from my paralyzed, helpless body. They did not bother to go upstairs to the private master bedroom. They moved slowly to the ruined, slashed leather sofa directly in my strict line of sight. They wanted me to watch them. They wanted to firmly establish their ultimate complete dominance over my entire life. They wanted the helpless king to witness exactly how the treacherous thieves claimed his beautiful queen and his massive kingdom. I retreated entirely deep into my own mind, building a massive, highly secure mental wall against the terrible, sickening sounds filling my destroyed living room. I focused completely on the rhythmic, steady beep of my digital heart monitor. I thought about my brave son, Trey, hiding somewhere upstairs in his bedroom, completely terrified of the monsters roaming his home. I thought about my beautiful daughter, Aaliyah, completely unaware of the terrible, massive danger her husband had brought to our family. I let Tasha and Darnell have their sick, highly twisted moment of fake victory. Let them drink my expensive liquor. Let them mock my frozen body, and let them plan their grand, impossible escape. They were completely, entirely oblivious to the massive, highly loaded weapon aimed directly at their heads. They thought I was a broken, dying vegetable. They had absolutely no idea that they were dancing happily on top of a massive, heavily armed landmine, and my finger was resting firmly directly on the explosive trigger. The destroyed living room was completely dark except for the pale glow of the digital heart monitor. Tasha and Darnell had finally stumbled upstairs, leaving their empty crystal glasses and their filthy betrayal on the ruined hardwood floor. The heavy silence of the massive estate settled around my narrow hospital bed. The synthetic drug Dr. Carter gave me was slowly beginning to wear off right on the exact medical schedule we planned. I could feel the cold, sharp pins and needles returning to my heavy fingertips. Around 2:00 in the morning, I heard a very soft, incredibly quiet creak coming from the grand wooden staircase. It was a sound I knew perfectly well. It was the careful, terrified step of an 8-year-old boy trying desperately not to wake the dangerous monsters sleeping above him. Trey crept slowly into the living room, wearing his soft cotton pajamas. He looked at the terrible wreckage of our expensive home, his wide eyes scanning the slashed leather sofas and the shattered glass. He walked cautiously toward my metal bed, his small bare feet making absolutely no sound on the floor. He stood right beside me, looking down at my bruised, frozen face. Dad Trey whispered, his tiny voice cracking with immense, pure heartbreak. Are you still in there, Dad? I waited exactly 10 seconds, listening intently to the quiet, dark house. I had to be absolutely certain that Tasha was not lurking in the shadows, waiting to trap me. The only sound was the low, steady hum of the expensive refrigerator in the massive kitchen. I focused every single ounce of my returning strength, forcing the heavy chemical veil to lift from my brain. I slowly, carefully opened my eyes and looked directly at my brave, beautiful son. Trey gasped loudly, his tiny hands flying up to cover his mouth, stifling a massive scream of pure shock. He took a fast, terrified step backward, thinking I was a ghost waking from the dead. I forced my heavy facial muscles to move. I gave him a slow, incredibly deliberate wink. Dad Trey breathed out tears spilling rapidly down his small cheeks. "You are actually awake." I lifted my stiff, heavy index finger to my lips. "Shh," I whispered, my voice sounding like rough, dry sandpaper, unused and entirely raw. "Do not let them hear us, son." Trey nodded frantically, stepping quickly back to the edge of the metal bed. He grabbed my cold, heavy hand, his small grip incredibly strong, pumping pure, vital life directly back into my tired veins. "They said you were completely brain dead, Dad," Trey whispered, wiping his wet face with his pajama sleeve. "They told me you would never ever wake up." "They are terrible liars, Trey," I said, squeezing his tiny hand with my returning strength. "Just like they lied about Dallas and just like they lied about the poisoned milk. I am right here, son. But it has to be our absolute, highly secure secret. You cannot tell your sister Aaliyah, and you definitely cannot tell your mother. It is incredibly dangerous right now. I promise, Dad," Trey said, his small chest puffing out with sudden immense bravery. "Are you hungry?" he asked. "Do you need me to get you some water?" I nodded slowly, feeling the brutal, dry desert in my throat. Trey ran quickly to the dark kitchen, avoiding the sharp, broken glass with expert care. He came back holding a small carton of cold apple juice and a clean plastic spoon. He carefully fed me small, freezing sips of the sweet liquid. It tasted like absolute heaven, washing away the terrible, lingering taste of the heavy paralytic drug and the bitter scotch Darnell had poured on my face. "Why is Mom doing this terrible stuff?" Dad Trey asked, feeding me another careful spoonful of the cold juice. "Why does she hate us so much?" "It is not hate, son," I explained softly, looking into his pure, innocent eyes. "It is blind, absolute greed. They want the massive shipping empire and they want the heavy bank accounts. They completely forgot about the actual people living inside this house. I hate them both," Trey said, his young voice suddenly hardening into a cold, dark tone. "I want to call the police on them. I want them to go to a dark jail. We will send them to a very dark place," and I promised him, gripping his hand tightly. "But we need complete, absolute proof first. We have to catch them exactly when they think they have totally won the entire war. We are playing a very long, highly dangerous game right now. Trey and I need you to be my bravest soldier. Can you do a special mission for me today?" Trey stood up perfectly straight, looking exactly like a tiny, fierce version of myself. "Yes, sir," Trey said quietly. "Tell me exactly what to do." "I need you to be my invisible spy," I instructed him, my voice gaining a steady, heavy rhythm. "You watch them closely and you listen to every single word they say. When they sit in the kitchen tomorrow, I need you to slide your school tablet completely under the marble island. Turn on the recording app and leave it hidden in the dark shadows. And Trey, if they ever get violent or if they look at you with angry eyes, you run directly to your room and lock the heavy door. Do you completely understand me?" "I understand everything," Dad Trey whispered, leaning down to carefully hug my neck. He stayed with me for another quiet hour, holding my hand in the dark, destroyed living room. He fixed my thin hospital pillow, and he pulled the white cotton sheets up over my cold shoulders. He gave me more deep, genuine love in that single hour than Tasha had given me in 10 long years of fake marriage. When the sky outside the tall windows began to turn a faint early gray, Trey kissed my forehead softly. "I have to go back upstairs now, Dad," he whispered, "before the monsters wake up and find me here." "Go quickly, son," I said, closing my eyes to resume my paralyzed, frozen performance. "I love you more than life itself." Trey crept silently back up the grand staircase, melting away into the heavy morning shadows. I lay in the cold metal bed, listening to the steady beep of my heart monitor. The terrible physical pain was still there, and the absolute humiliation of my fake condition weighed heavily on my chest. But the brutal, completely helpless feeling was entirely gone. I was no longer just surviving the terrible poison. I had a loyal ally, working actively on the inside. I had a fierce, brave soldier ready to help me burn their completely fake kingdom straight down to the absolute ground. The harsh morning light filtered through the heavy silk curtains, illuminating the absolute destruction of my living room. I lay perfectly still on the narrow hospital bed, wearing the slack, frozen mask of a completely brain-dead man. My muscles ached terribly from holding the rigid posture, but my mind was completely focused, waiting for the daily horror to begin. In the adjacent kitchen, the heavy sounds of clinking glass and frustrated sighs echoed loudly. Tasha and Darnell were awake, suffering from a massive, expensive Scotch hangover and the crushing weight of their ticking deadline. I felt a tiny, almost invisible plastic earpiece resting deep inside my right ear canal. Calvin had installed it secretly at the hotel, linking it directly to the hidden microphones in the air vents and to the secure recording app on Trey tablet. My brave little boy had executed his dangerous mission perfectly. He had slid his school tablet entirely under the massive marble kitchen island before he quietly crept back upstairs to his room. Now I was virtually sitting right at the table with the two ruthless monsters, listening to every single vicious word they spoke. They were incredibly stressed today. The massive freeze on my corporate accounts had terrified them entirely. They were bleeding cash rapidly, and the violent mobsters were returning at midnight to collect $2.5 million. They needed to drastically cut their daily expenses and figure out how to pay the massive legal fees for my emergency conservatorship hearing. "We simply cannot keep him here, Tasha," Darnell said, his voice muffled slightly by a mouthful of expensive toast. "Do you know exactly how much a kid actually costs us every single month? The private school tuition, the expensive clothes, the organic food. We are bleeding completely dry here. We need every single cent for the corrupt lawyers to get the old man accounts legally unlocked. The kid is just a massive, useless drain on our absolute survival." I lay in the quiet living room, waiting for Tasha to defend her only child. I waited for the basic biological maternal instinct that even wild wolves possess to fiercely kick in. I waited for her to slap Darnell across the face and tell him that Trey was her own flesh and blood. But the heavy silence stretched out completely. It was a cold, incredibly calculating silence. "He's getting way too suspicious anyway," Tasha finally said, her voice entirely flat, completely devoid of any human emotion. "I catch him staring at me constantly. He has those exact same judging, cold eyes as his father. Yesterday I found him lurking quietly in the dark hallway when we were discussing the legal medical papers. He is far too quiet, Darnell. He definitely knows something is wrong. He is a massive legal liability." Darnell grunted in loud agreement, setting his heavy coffee mug down hard on the marble counter. "If he talks to the state social workers tomorrow," Darnell pointed out, his voice laced with deep paranoia. "If they come to formally check on Reginald and the kid says one single wrong thing about how we treat the old man, we are completely finished. We cannot risk a massive police investigation right now. We need to get rid of him immediately. Get rid of him." The brutal words hung in the stale air like heavy, toxic smoke. My heart hammered violently against my ribs, and I prayed the thick white duvet covered the rapid, furious rise and fall of my chest. They were casually discussing my 8-year-old son like he was a broken, highly expensive appliance they wanted to throw in the garbage. "What are the actual options here?" Tasha asked, sounding exactly like she was choosing a color for her new luxury curtains. "I looked into a few strict military schools," Darnell suggested, his voice taking on that slick, highly manipulative salesman tone. "There is a very harsh one out in Alabama. It is incredibly strict, very cheap, and they gladly take severe problem cases. We could easily tell the courts he is acting out violently because of your husband's tragic medical condition." Tasha snorted loudly, a dismissive, highly arrogant sound. "Even the cheap military schools cost a few thousand a month, Darnell," she argued coldly. "We do not have $5,000 a month to waste on a spoiled brat. We need a permanent solution that is completely free, or better yet, a solution that actually pays us a monthly stipend." I clenched my jaw so incredibly hard, I actually felt a back molar crack slightly under the massive pressure. She wanted to sell her own son for a profit or throw him entirely to the wolves to save her designer lifestyle. "We could surrender him entirely to state care," Darnell suggested, darkly pushing the evil plan even further. "We simply tell the state child services that with Reginald's severe tragic condition, you cannot physically cope anymore. You are a deeply grieving, highly exhausted wife caring for an entirely invalid husband. The daily stress is just too much for your fragile mental health. You are having a massive nervous breakdown. Absolutely no one would blame you for temporarily giving up the kid for his own good. You are the ultimate victim here, Tasha." I could hear the bright, wicked smile in her voice when she eagerly replied, "That is a completely brilliant idea, baby." Tasha purred happily. The deeply tragic, beautiful heroine, painfully forced to give up her only son just to care for her dying husband. The corrupt family courts would eat that dramatic story right up. We could probably even get a heavy financial stipend from the state for my severe emotional distress. They laughed together loudly. They sat in my expensive kitchen drinking my imported coffee and laughed maliciously about throwing my innocent son into the brutal foster system. They laughed about completely erasing him from their selfish lives just so they could have more financial room to spend the billions of dollars I earned. "But what if he actually talks to the foster parents?" Darnell asked nervously, his deep cowardice showing through. "What if he tells them what he actually sees happening in this house? Who is ever going to believe a traumatized little boy?" Tasha snapped aggressively. "He's only 8 years old, Darnell. We will tell the social workers he is a pathological liar. We tell them he makes up terrible stories for attention because he misses his healthy father. I am his actual mother, Darnell. My legal word is absolute law. Besides, if we send him to a crowded state home in a completely different district, we will absolutely never see him again. He will be someone else's massive problem." My vision went entirely red behind my closed eyelids. The heavy rage was completely different this time. It was not the hot, fiery anger of a betrayed husband. It was the cold, absolute, incredibly lethal rage of a protective father. Tasha was not just a terrible, ungrateful wife. She was a complete, irredeemable monster. She was a creature completely void of a human soul. "When do we actually do this?" Darnell asked, completely eager to remove the child from the house. "I will call the emergency social services first thing tomorrow morning," Tasha decided firmly. "I will put on my absolute best, highly dramatic crying act. By tomorrow night, the state workers will come and take him away. And then it is just us, baby. Just us, the heavy conservatorship and the massive money. Tomorrow night." The heavy words echoed deeply in my furious mind. They were going to discard my beautiful boy tomorrow. I lay there perfectly still, feeling the heavy vibration of their footsteps as they moved carelessly around the destroyed house. I had heard absolutely enough. The time for gathering evidence was entirely over. I had heard absolutely enough to condemn them both to hell. The time for waiting patiently in the dark was completely over. I lay in the cold hospital bed, listening carefully to their heavy footsteps. Tasha and Darnell walked out to the back patio to smoke my imported cigars and celebrate their wicked victory. The heavy glass door slid shut, locking them outside in the hot Atlanta air. I was completely alone in the ruined living room. The heavy synthetic drug was almost entirely gone from my tired muscles. I slowly, carefully moved my right hand under the thick white blankets. I reached down to the heavy metal frame of the medical bed, feeling for the small piece of hidden tape. Calvin had securely taped a tiny, highly encrypted burner phone right under the mattress before we left the hotel. My stiff fingers peeled the heavy tape away. I pulled the small black phone directly into my cold palm. I kept it completely hidden under the thick duvet, shielding the bright digital screen with my heavy body. I unlocked the simple device, opening the direct secure message line to Calvin. My hands were shaking slightly, not from physical weakness, but from the sheer absolute force of the violent justice I was about to unleash. I typed 3 simple, highly lethal words. Execute the burn. It was our prearranged, deeply secure code. It meant the passive observation phase was entirely finished. It meant the strict protection protocol was completely lifted and it was officially time to take out the heavy trash. I hit the send button, watching the tiny digital arrow fly off the small screen. I slid the burner phone back under the heavy mattress, letting my arms fall completely limp again. I closed my eyes, taking a deep, entirely satisfying breath of the stale, dusty air inside my destroyed home. I could easily picture exactly what was happening across the busy city. I saw Calvin making the immediate, highly destructive phone calls. I saw my elite corporate lawyers filing the massive, completely ironclad legal injunctions blocking Tasha from ever gaining medical conservatorship. I saw the bank managers hitting the final absolute kill switches on every single hidden account. But most importantly, I pictured Calvin making one very specific, highly emotional phone call. He was calling my beautiful daughter, Aaliyah. He was telling her the absolute unvarnished truth about her fake, abusive husband. He was sending her the exact audio files of Darnell threatening her life and laughing about my brutal murder. Aaliyah needed to see the terrible monster completely stripped of his expensive, charming disguise. It would break her gentle heart today, but it would absolutely save her entire life tomorrow. The heavy glass patio door slid open loudly. Tasha and Darnell walked back into the destroyed living room, bringing the bitter smell of expensive cigar smoke with them. They did not even glance at my narrow hospital bed. I was just a completely solved problem to them, a piece of broken furniture waiting to be dragged away. They sat heavily on the slashed leather sofa, pouring another large round of my vintage scotch. "We have 24 hours to get this completely done, Tasha," Darnell said, his voice slurring slightly from the heavy alcohol. "I will call the aggressive lawyers at exactly 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. We will legally force the corrupt judge to sign the medical papers before noon. Then I will wire the massive cash to the underground sports book and we will finally be completely free." Tasha smiled lazily, leaning her head back against the torn leather. "It is going to be so incredibly beautiful, baby," she purred happily. "Just think about all that massive money entirely unblocked, sitting completely ready for us to spend. We will buy a massive private villa in the south of France and we will absolutely never look back." Suddenly, Tasha's cell phone buzzed loudly on the marble coffee table. It vibrated harshly against the broken glass, an angry, highly demanding sound. She frowned deeply, picking up the expensive device. "It is my lead attorney," Tasha said, her voice dropping in complete confusion. "Why is he emailing me highly urgent legal documents at this incredibly late hour?" She opened the urgent digital message, her eyes scanning the complex legal text. The lazy, arrogant smile completely vanished from her face, instantly replaced by a mask of pure, absolute horror. All the blood drained rapidly from her cheeks, leaving her looking exactly like a pale, terrified ghost. "No. Tasha whispered, her hands shaking so violently she almost dropped the heavy phone. This is completely impossible, Darnell. What is it? Tasha Darnell demanded, sitting up quickly, the heavy panic instantly sobering his drunk mind. Did the old man die already? It is a massive legal injunction. Tasha gasped out, completely struggling to catch her breath. The top corporate law firm in Atlanta just filed an emergency block against our specific conservatorship application. They filed it exactly 10 minutes ago. The email says Reginald Jefferson has an ironclad, irrevocable living trust, completely managed by an independent legal board. The trust clearly states that if he is ever declared medically incompetent, all his personal and corporate assets are instantly, permanently frozen and legally transferred to a blind charity holding. Darnell stared at her, his jaw dropping wide open in complete total shock. What the hell does that actually mean, Tasha? He screamed, grabbing the expensive phone out of her shaking hands. Read it to me in plain English right now. It means we get absolutely nothing. Darnell. Tasha shrieked, her voice cracking with pure, unadulterated terror.